did a conference 2 years ago in the Philippines called The Future Reimagined, where we bring people who are with tech background to talk about the future. We bring social entrepreneur and CSR practitioners to talk about doing good. So mixing these two very distinct group of people together, you know, it sparked a lot of very interesting conversations. So you got invited in September, hopefully if everything goes well, you know, to our another part series on business and community reimagined. So this conversation, we think that is quite timely, especially, you know, because of the crisis that we're going through right now. We wanted to seek thought leaders' reflections on, you know, what should business do right now? You know, how can communities come together? And what is interesting about yourself, Sandy, is you are both a community leader as well as a business leader. So you should be wearing both of your hats talking to me.
Yes, yes, indeed.
So we all know that theory is one thing. You know, right now, you know, we can talk about responsible businesses, but the truth is, you know, unless you are Amazon.com, most of the businesses are, you know, being taken a big hit.
Yes.
Yeah. So if your future is uncertain, how do you even do good? So my first question, which I sent to you, was, you know, what should responsible business do? You know, is that even a relevant question?
Yes, yes, of course. I think time and time again, when you look at SARS, when you look at MERS and all these other disaster or crises, like the Fukushima meltdown and all the tsunami, the business sector and the private sector can play a very important role in not just protecting people, helping people, but also after that, you know, after the whole entire crisis and disaster, the recovery of things. So that is extremely important. And I get that, and I agree that you must, number one, take care of yourself first. So the most important thing now. Yes, so you have to basically protect your wealth. You have to make sure you're financially resilient. And you need to stay solvent. So that is the most important thing. Then you can look at taking care of people around you, but you can almost do that with a balance. You can't just cut everyone, because when times return back to normal, you're going to have a hard time. Exactly. You're going to have a hard time maintaining your reputation. You're going to have a hard time acquiring or even retaining your good employees, because, you know, when people are being let go during bad times, they're not going to come back to you. Right. And so this is another thing, you can do it with a balance. And there are many good stories and cases where businesses have stepped up and do the things that some governments were unable to do, which means like they were able to disseminate information, because we spend a lot of time at work. You know, factory workers, blue collar workers, white collar workers, we spend, you know, a huge portion of our working hours and also social hours with our colleagues and with our bosses. So when you go to work, I think the business sector has a responsibility at this time, number one, to make sure that all their employees and all their partners in the supply chain are being taken care of. In other words, they are healthy. Safety is number one. So that's what companies can do. And the information must be clear and consistent and on a daily basis. So people will go to work and they'll be looking for their supervisors or their managers or their executives to keep giving them that message. Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, the companies can ensure that the employees do everything they can to wash their hands, to maintain that physical distance. People who are sick, they're allowed to go. They will not be punished. I gather that a lot of companies may even go through this culling exercise. So if they have any team members or any employees who are not performing well, who are deadwood, maybe it might compel some of them to let these people go. So you see a lot of trimming and a lot of leaning of these organizations. It may be a good thing for some organizations. You know, previously they weren't able to have that difficult conversation when times are good. You know, during this time. I would like to think that it's not a good excuse, but I think people can understand and people will be understanding that, look, the company needs to be efficient, and therefore that conversation should be very open and transparent. So if they think that some workers are not doing well, perhaps, you know, reorientate them, reskill them, and ask, you know, what would they like to do? You have, you know, this redundancy package, you can cut down your pay, or you can reorient your work. So this is time where you can have that that honest conversation. During good times, people are just too busy trying to make money, trying to fight fire. So, you know, they just wanted to. It's very typical human behavior to just focus on opportunities and then just focus on, you know, making more money and being profitable. And also, you know, most people don't like uncomfortable conversation. And so during this time, this may be a good, you know, good time to have that conversation. Having said that, if, say, for example, some of your employees are sick, or they need to be at home to take care of their parents or their spouses or their children, then you need to be understanding.
Yes.
So you either do a rotation thing, or you give them opportunities to come to work maybe once a week or something. But basically, you got to give them the tools. You got to give them the ability to make sure that they are set up at home, they have the right software. So I hear from some people where they said they have to do remote working and they were very resistant. And some of them are older people, mainly because they may not have the software, they may not have that access, they don't know how to work out their VPN and all that. So the companies must be a little bit patient, and they have to be very educational at this time just to get everyone on board. But once this is set up, we are ready for remote working, and who knows, this could be the new normal. Other ways of basically taking care of your employees is also, I've heard of examples, and I've also seen some examples, like in the States. What they do is, apart from letting the employees choose whether they're happy to do a pay cut or use up all their annual leave, in some companies, what they did was they actually give their employees loans. Because a lot of big corporations, they have these collective bargaining power. So they can go to banks and say, look, could you give us a loan? And then you then extend this loan to your employees at a very, very small rate. So instead of the typical industry standard of 14 or 17%, you'll be just charging your employees at 2 or 3% or even none, just to keep everyone afloat. Everyone is in this together, right? So if the company can do that, that would be most conducive.
Well, the first thing that responsible business should be doing is to look after their employees.
Yes, that's the first and foremost important thing. Yeah.
Right. And then you look into what can you do, you know, to make a difference to the community.
Yes, correct. Absolutely. And
have you seen any good examples?
So start internally. So, you know, putting out very consistent, clear message. I mean, it's all got to do with leadership, to be honest. Whether the leader is able to step up strategically, or he's just panicking and looking at operational efficiency, cutting down manpower. You can't just do that. You have to have a balance. In fact, during this time, we tend to advise our clients to maintain market research, to maintain a portion of their marketing, because you need to be able to re-gear the way your team thinks and the way they go out there to engage with the customers. People are still spending. They're just a little bit more discerning. So I'm not saying take advantage of this or be opportunistic about this. You know, you've got to really watch the tone, because if you're not empathetic, if you're not genuine, people would just distrust you. Right. However, if you do this nicely and if you do this genuinely, then people will remember your name and your brand. Because when people go through crisis, there's a lot of emotions and a lot of mental stress. So if you come through for them during a crisis, you will gain their loyalty and their trust long term. And I'm not just talking about customers. That includes employees. So your employees will be more loyal than ever to work with you. I mean, you already see this happening in some cases where the CEOs or the C-suite executives in some countries, what they did was they have a scaling. thing with pay cut. So the people with the biggest pay get the largest cut.
The
People
Singapore
with the
government.
people with the lowest pay get the least cut.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because during good times, a lot of these C-suite executives are earning a lot of money. They have a lot of bonus packages. They have a lot of shares. So it's only fair to some extent and constructive and smart if you do this, because then your employees can see that, wow, my boss is taking the biggest cut. I'm just going to dedicate, myself to this company. And I remember back maybe 20 odd years ago when I was working for American Express, we just came out from the global recession back in the late 80s and early 90s. I'm giving out my age. So I remember the divisional director at that time for Asia Pacific, she took a huge pay cut. She was the first to go into the office, and she was the last to leave.
Wow.
She was like a real role model, and she led by example. So she took a pay cut. She basically cut out all her allowance, and back then she had like $10,000 worth of allowance every month because she's a divisional director, and it's an American company. And so when everyone saw that, everyone just thought, wow, let's do something to keep this department afloat. So I think leadership is so important. I know it sounds like cliche for some people, but if you can't step up as a strategic leader, if you can't demonstrate that you care about your employees more than yourself, then it's going to be really interesting time. Because some employees, for example, they have very special skills. If they see that there is a movement and people are getting fired, then they will just jump ship, and you're literally sending your best people to your competitors. So these are just some of the things that companies can do and companies need to be aware of.